Section 4 of Library Essays, papers related to the work of public libraries. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Azza. Library Essays, papers related to the work of public libraries, by Arthur Elmore Bostwick. Lay control in libraries and elsewhere. The system by which the control of a concern is vested in a person or a body having no expert technical knowledge of its workings has become so common that it may be regarded as characteristic of modern civilization. If this seems to anyone an extreme statement, a little reflection will convince him to the contrary. To cite only a few examples, the boards of directors of commercial or financial institutions, like our manufacturing corporations, our railways and our banks, of charitable foundations like our hospitals and our asylums, of educational establishments like our schools and colleges, are now not expected to understand the detail of the institutions under their charge. Their first duty is to put at the head of their work an expert with a staff of competent assistants to see to that part of it. Even in most of our churches, the minister or pastor, the expert head, is employed and practically controlled by a lay body of some kind, a vestry, a session, or the like. Government itself is similarly conducted. Neither the legislative nor the executive branch is expected to be made up of experts who understand the technical detail of departmental work. All this is left to subordinates. Even the heads of departments often know nothing at all of the particular work over which they have been set until they have held their position for some time. It is hardly necessary to say that this system of lay control is of interest to us here and now, because it obtains in most libraries where the governing body is a board of trustees or directors who are generally not experts, but who employ a librarian to superintend their work. To multiply examples would be superfluous. Lay control, as above illustrated, is not universal, but I postpone for the present a consideration of its antitheses and its exceptions. It looks illogical, and when the ordinary citizen's attention is brought to the matter in any way, he generally so considers it. In certain cases, it is even a familiar object of satire. The general public is apt, I think, to regard lay control as improper or absurd. With the expert and his staff, who are concerned directly with the management of the institution in question, the feeling is a little different. It is more like that of President Cleveland when he had Congress on his hands, a sort of anxious tolerance. They bear with the board that employs them because it has the power of the purse, but they are glad when it adjourns without interfering unduly with them. Are either of these points of view justified? Should lay boards of directors be abolished? Or, if retained, should those without expert knowledge be barred? Now, at first sight, it certainly seems as if the ultimate control of every business or operation should be in the hands of those who thoroughly understand it, and this would certainly bar out lay control. I believe that this view is superficial and will not bear close analysis. The idea that those who control an institution should be familiar with its details appears to originate in an analogy with a man's control of his own private affairs, when his occupation and income make it necessary that he should attend to all those affairs personally. The citizen who digs and plants his own garden must understand some of the details of gardening. The man who does his own odd jobs about the house must be able to drive a nail and handle a paintbrush. This necessity vanishes, however, as the man's interests become more varied and his financial ability to care for them becomes greater. At a certain point, personal attention to detail becomes not only unnecessary, but impossible. To expect the master of a great estate to understand the details of his garden, his stable, his kennels, as well as the experts to whom he entrusts them, is absurd. He may, of course, as a matter of amusement, busy himself in some one department, but if he tries to superintend everything personally, still more to understand and regulate matters of detail, he is wasting his time. We must seek our analogy, then, both for lay control and for the attitude of the ordinary citizen toward it, in that citizen's management of his private affairs. He knows his own business, or thinks he does, and he finds it hard to realize that the details of that business could ever grow beyond his personal control. But, after all, this progress is one towards the normal. Attention to details in the case of the poor man is forced upon him. Except in rare cases, he does not really care to shovel his own snow. He would prefer to hire a man to do it, and as soon as he can, he does do so. So long as his sidewalk is properly cleared, he is willing to leave the details to the man who clears it. He does not care whether that man begins at the north or the south end, or whether his shovelfuls are small or large. Here, if we examine, we shall find a common characteristic of those kinds of work where laymen are in control. The persons for whom the work is done care very much about results. They are careless of methods so long as those results are attained. And in a very large number of cases, the persons for whom the work is done will be found to be the public, or so large a section of it that it is practically a group of laymen so far as the particular work in question may be concerned. A lay board of directors, or a lay departmental head, then, is simply and properly a representative of a greater lay body that is particularly anxious for results and not particularly anxious about methods. Lay control is thus not illogical, but is the outcome of a regular and very proper development. But, as has been said, it is not the only method of controlling a great institution. An institution may be managed by a graded body of experts. So were the old guilds of craftsmen managed. So are many ecclesiastical bodies, notably the Roman Catholic Church. We may call this method of control hierarchical. It has some advantages over lay control and some disadvantages. We may imagine such a system applied to libraries. All the libraries in a state, we will say, would then be managed by the state librarian, and all these offices would be subject to the orders of the librarian of the National Library, who would be supreme and accountable to no one. Without going into detailed discussion of this extremely supposititious case, we may say that the objection to it would be that the persons who are especially interested in the results of the work done are not represented in the controlling hierarchy. Where the persons interested are all experts, as in a guild of craftsmen, there can perhaps be no objection to control by experts, though even in this case we are leaving out of consideration the persons, generally laymen, for whom the craftsmen do their work. In fact, any trouble that may arise from the lay control of a body of expert workers lies just here, in the failure either of the controlling authority or the trained subordinates to recognize and keep within their limitations. It should be the function of the supreme lay authority to decide what results it wants and then to see that it gets them, to call attention to any deviation from them, and to replace those who cannot achieve them by others who can. It should be the part of the expert staff of subordinates to discover by what methods these results can best be reached, and then to follow out these methods. When the layhead attempts to direct the details of method, or when the trained subordinate thinks it his duty to influence the policy of the institution, then there is apt to be trouble. Such results are apt to follow. On the one hand, the inclusion in a board of trustees of a man with a passion for detail and a great personal interest in the work under him, but without a keen realization of the necessity for strict organization and discipline in his expert staff. Or, on the other hand, from the presence in that staff of a masterful man who cannot rest until he is in virtual control of whatever he concerns himself about. I say trouble is apt to follow in such cases. It does not always follow, for the organization may adapt itself to circumstances. The interested trustee may play with ease his two roles, fitting into his board as a lay member and becoming practically also a part of the expert staff. The masterful subordinate may dominate his board so as to become its dictator, and thus do away for a time with his lay control. We have all seen both these things happen, not only in libraries, but in banks, in hospitals, in charitable institutions. In some cases, it has been well that they have happened. But although an occasional stick is flexible enough to be tied into a knot, it would be hazardous to try the experiment with all sticks. Some may bend, but more will break. Is it not better to accept frankly the division of labor that seems to have been pointed out by the development of our institutions for the guidance of their management? Boards of trustees in this case would find it necessary to decide first on the desirable results to be reached in their work. This is a phase of library discussion that has been somewhat neglected. What is the public library trying to get at? Not stated in vague terms, but in concrete form so that the trustees can call the librarian to account if he fails to accomplish it. It is only fair to the librarian that he should be informed at the outset precisely what he is expected to do, and then it is only fair that he should be left to do it in his own way. This is an unoccupied field, and it would be an eminently proper one for the trustees section of the American Library Association. We librarians should be very glad to know just what you expect us to accomplish, for on that depends our manner of setting to work. Do you wish us to aim at decreasing the percentage of illiteracy in the community, or the arrests for drunkenness? Are we to strive for an increased circulation? And will an absolute increase be satisfactory, or must it be an increase proportionate to population? Is it definitely demanded of us to decrease our fiction percentage? Shall we, in any given case, devote our attention chiefly to the home use or the reference use of the library? Shall we favor the student or the ordinary citizen? These questions, of course, cannot receive a general answer. They must be decided differently in different cases, but at least we may agree on the type of question that it is admissible to answer at all, and on the degree of detail to which it is permissible to go in stating a requirement. For instance, is it admissible for a board to say to its librarian, the results that we require you to show include the following, a well-ordered collection of books classified according to the Dewey System, bound in half duck and distributed with the aid of the Brown charging system. I think it will be granted that this would be an attempt to control the details of method in the guise of a statement of desired results. But where shall we draw the line? How specific may be the things that a board may properly require of its expert staff? That is the question whose solution by this section would be an inestimable benefit to all libraries and librarians. At present, there is wide difference of opinion and of practice on this point. Many people would not agree at all with the limitations that have just been laid down. Even those who do agree would differ widely over their interpretation. There is hardly time to anticipate and meet criticism. I shall be reminded, I suppose, that the funds for carrying on the library's work are in the hands of the trustees, and that one of the main objects of their existence is to see that the money is honestly spent, not stolen or wasted. How can they do this without close oversight of methods? To this I would reply that this important function of the board is distinctly the requirement of a result, that result being the honest administration of the library. The method by which it may be administered most honestly is best left to the expert head. Naturally, if evidence of peculation or waste comes before the board, the librarian will be held to account as having failed to achieve the required result of honest administration. In this, and in other respects, the necessity that the board should know whether or not the desired results are being attained means that the work of the executive officer should be followed with attention. It must be evident, however, that this does not involve control and dictation of methods. It must also be remembered that what has been said refers only to the administrative control of the institution. The duties of trustees as custodians of an endowment fund, if such there be, or in soliciting and receiving contributions, as well as other financial considerations, are separate from this and have not been considered. Again, I shall be told that the head of the executive staff is not only a subordinate, but also an expert advisor of his board. This is true, and as a consulting expert, it is his duty to give advice outside of his own administrative field if he is asked for it. It may even be his duty to give it unasked occasionally, but this comes very near to the interference that I have deprecated. He who would tread this borderland must tread softly. On the other hand, the expert may and should ask the advice of members of his board as individuals, or of the board as a whole, when he needs it and when he feels that it would give him confidence or strengthen his hand. In this whole matter, there is a clear distinction between the advisory and executive function on one hand and on the other. In short, the view taken in this paper may be briefly summed up as follows. Lay control in libraries and elsewhere is a logical and proper development. It would not, on the whole, be well for one who should wish to endow a library to make an expert librarian sole trustee for life with power to select his successor. That would be a fine thing for the librarian, but it would be neither desirable nor proper. It is well that the trustees should be responsible representatives of the lay public, for whose benefit the library is to be conducted. But as the public is interested chiefly in results, the trustees should confine themselves largely to the indication and requirement of these results, leaving methods in the hand of their expert staff of subordinates. And it is eminently desirable that librarians should hear from a representative body of trustees some expression of opinion regarding the extent of this limitation. End of section 4.